The Galactic Council chambers hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered around the massive circular table. At the center, a holographic display showed star charts marking recent territorial disputes along the outer rim. Admiral Zephyros of the Valtarian Empire adjusted his forearms nervously, his scaled hide shifting from deep blue to worried purple. "The situation has become untenable," announced Chancellor Crix, her insectoid mandibles clicking with each word. "These humans continue to expand into sectors that rightfully belong to established civilizations. Their aggression knows no bounds." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being of pure living crystal named Resonance of Truth, chimed in with harmonic frequencies that translated as deep concern. "Their military expansion has tripled in the past solar cycle. They show no respect for the ancient territorial agreements that have kept peace for millennia." Admiral Zephyros stood, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. The Valtarians had been the dominant military force in this sector for over 3,000 years, and their empire spanned dozens of star systems. "I propose we send them a clear message. One decisive strike to show them their place in the galactic hierarchy." The room erupted in discussions. Species that had never agreed on anything were now united in their frustration with humanity's rapid expansion. The humans had only made contact with the galactic community 50 years ago, yet they had already established colonies in 12 systems and were actively mining asteroids in disputed territories. "They're primitives," scoffed Ambassador Thorne of the Nexus Confederation, his gray skin rippling with disdain. "Single-star species that barely understand quantum mechanics. How difficult could it be to put them in their place?" Dr. Valara, the lone voice of caution from the Healers Guild, raised her luminescent hand. "Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic solutions first. The humans have shown remarkable adaptability in their short time among us." Her suggestion was met with dismissive gestures and sounds of disagreement. Admiral Zephyros slammed his primary fist on the table, causing several smaller species to jump in alarm. "Diplomacy? They've ignored every cease and desist order we've sent. They continue mining operations in the Kepler Nebula despite our warnings. They've established military outposts in 3 neutral zones." Chancellor Crix's compound eyes glittered with malicious intent. "The Admiral is correct. These humans need to learn that this galaxy has an established order. They cannot simply arrive and claim whatever they desire." The vote was swift and decisive. 39 species voted in favor of military action, with only 8 abstaining. Dr. Valara's Healers Guild was notably among those who refused to participate, along with a few other peaceful species who had little military capability anyway. Admiral Zephyros began outlining the plan immediately. "We'll strike their primary colony world of New Terra first. It's their most heavily populated settlement outside their home system. A show of overwhelming force should make them reconsider their expansion policies. The Valtarian fleet was legendary throughout the galaxy. Their dreadnoughts were city-sized vessels capable of cracking small moons. Their plasma cannons could vaporize mountains, and their shield technology was considered impenetrable. Combined with forces from the Nexus Confederation and support ships from a dozen other species, the assembled armada would number over 200 vessels. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" asked Commander Hiss of the Serpentine Dominion, his forked tongue tasting the air nervously. Admiral Zephyros displayed a holographic analysis of human ships. Primitive kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, and nuclear missiles. Their largest vessels are roughly equivalent to our light cruisers. Intelligence suggests they have fewer than 50 combat-capable ships across their entire territory. Laughter echoed through the chamber. The idea that such a militarily inferior species had been causing them concern seemed almost embarrassing in retrospect. The humans used chemical rockets for much of their space travel, still relied heavily on ballistic weapons, and their ships looked like crude metal cylinders compared to the elegant, organic curves of most galactic vessels. "How long until we can deploy?" Chancellor Crix asked, her excitement barely contained. 3 cycles, Admiral Zephyros replied confidently. "We'll assemble the fleet at the neutral station in the Andromeda Junction, then proceed directly to New Terra. The humans will have no advance warning." As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, already discussing their species' contributions to the coming campaign, Dr. Valara approached Admiral Zephyros privately. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed with concern. Admiral, I urge you to reconsider. There's something about these humans that troubles me. Their psychological profiles show remarkable resilience and adaptability. They've survived extinction events on their homeworld multiple times. The Admiral's purple hide shifted to amused orange. Doctor, with respect, your guild specializes in healing, not warfare. These humans may be resilient against natural disasters, but they've never faced the might of a united galactic fleet. This will be over before they know what hit them. Dr. Valara's patterns dimmed to worried blue. I've studied their history, Admiral. They have a concerning tendency to become exponentially more dangerous when threatened. Every major conflict in their species' development has resulted in rapid technological advancement. Ancient history, Admiral Zephyros dismissed with a wave of his smallest arm. Tribal conflicts on a single world are hardly comparable to interstellar warfare. Besides, they won't have time to adapt. We'll cripple their fleet and occupy their primary colonies within days. As the chamber emptied, Dr. Valara remained behind, staring at the holographic display of human territory. Something deep in her species' ancient genetic memory whispered warnings about cornering dangerous prey. The Healers Guild had survived for millions of years by understanding the delicate balance between predator and prey, hunter and hunted. She made a mental note to have her guild's fastest ships ready to evacuate wounded, from what she suspected would become a far bloodier conflict than anyone anticipated. The galaxy was about to learn something that Dr. Valera already suspected. When you mistake a sleeping apex predator for easy prey, you don't get a second chance to correct your error. The coordinates for New Terra glowed ominously in the hologram as the chamber lights dimmed, and somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, the largest military fleet in galactic history began preparing for what they believed would be a simple demonstration of power. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The long-range sensors had detected massive fleet movements in 3 different sectors, all converging toward human space. Her weathered face, marked by years of frontier service, remained calm despite the implications of what they were seeing. "Ma'am, the pattern analysis is complete," reported Lieutenant Kumar from the sensor station. "We're looking at approximately 200 alien vessels of various classifications. The largest ones are reading as Dreadnought class, roughly 8 times our mass." Chen nodded grimly. She'd expected this day would come eventually. Humanity's rapid expansion hadn't gone unnoticed, and the established galactic powers had made their displeasure known through increasingly hostile diplomatic channels. But the scale of this response surprised even her. Time to intercept? At their current trajectory and speed, they'll reach New Terra in 18 hours, Kumar replied, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Chen activated the emergency communication array. Within minutes, she was connected to Admiral Harrison aboard the UES Enterprise, humanity's flagship and the most advanced vessel in their small fleet. Harrison's grizzled features appeared on the main screen, his expression grim but determined. "Sarah, I've been watching the same readings. It looks like they're bringing everything they've got." "Orders, sir?" Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We can't match them ship for ship, but we're not going to roll over either. Initiate Protocol 7. Every available vessel is to rendezvous at the outer marker. We'll make our stand there." Protocol 7 was humanity's desperate contingency plan for exactly this scenario. Instead of trying to defend their scattered colonies individually, they would concentrate their entire fleet for a single decisive engagement. It was a strategy born from studying Earth's own military history, where smaller forces had occasionally defeated larger ones through superior tactics, coordination, and sheer determination. Chen's crew began implementing the protocol immediately. Across human space, mining ships were retrofitted with missile pods, civilian transports were armed with improvised weapons, and every combat vessel began converging on the designated coordinates. The human fleet numbered only 43 ships, but each one carried the accumulated knowledge of centuries of warfare, from a species that had weaponized everything from sharpened sticks to atomic fire. Meanwhile, aboard the UES Armstrong at the Mars shipyards, Dr. Elizabeth Wright was overseeing the final modifications to humanity's newest weapon systems. The daughter of refugees who had fled Earth during the resource wars, she had dedicated her life to ensuring humanity would never again be helpless in the face of superior force. "How long until the adaptive targeting systems are online?" she asked her lead engineer. 6 hours for basic functionality, 12 for full optimization." came the reply. Wright's jaw tightened. They needed every advantage they could get. The alien fleets possessed energy weapons and defensive systems far beyond current human technology. But humanity had something the aliens seemed to lack: the knowledge that survival often meant using every tool available, no matter how unconventional. What's the status on the kinetic bombardment platforms? Ready for deployment, but are you sure about this, Doctor? The energy requirements are enormous, and the margin for error is practically zero. Wright looked out at the construction yards where dozens of human ships were being hastily retrofitted with experimental weapons. Those aliens think they're dealing with a primitive species that they can intimidate into submission. They're about to learn why evolution doesn't produce successful predators by making them fair fighters. Back aboard the Defiant, Chen received updates from across human space. The civilian population was being evacuated from frontier colonies, but the colonists weren't fleeing in panic. Instead, they were implementing evacuation procedures they'd drilled dozens of times, moving to fortified positions and preparing for siege warfare if necessary. Captain, Communications Officer Zhang reported, "We're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. They're demanding our immediate surrender and withdrawal from all disputed territories." Chen almost smiled. Put it through. The alien admiral who appeared on screen was an impressive sight. Admiral Zephyros's 4 arms and scaled hide gave him an imposing presence, and his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed.
"Human vessel, I am Admiral Zephyros of the Valterian Empire."
"You are ordered to stand down immediately and prepare for boarding. Your species' aggressive expansion ends now." "Admiral," Chen replied calmly. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Defiant. I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline your generous offer." Zephyros's hide shifted to an angry red color. "Captain, you are facing the combined fleets of 47 galactic civilizations. Your entire military consists of primitive vessels that would serve as target practice for our weapons. Surrender now and your species will be permitted to retain your homeworld." Chen's expression hardened. She'd lost friends during humanity's expansion into space. Good people who had died establishing the colonies these aliens now demanded they abandon. "Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We don't abandon our people and we don't surrender our territory. If you want our colonies, you're going to have to take them." The alien admiral's 4 eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine surprise. "Your largest vessels are smaller than our escort frigates." "This is not bravery, Captain. This is suicide." "Maybe," Chen acknowledged. "But here's something you might not understand about our species, Admiral. We've been practicing warfare longer than most of your civilizations have existed. We've turned it into an art form. Every human child learns about battles where smaller forces defeated larger ones through superior strategy, better technology, or simple determination to survive." She leaned forward in her command chair. "You see overwhelming numbers and assume victory. We see a target-rich environment." Admiral Zephyros's hide shifted through several colors before settling on confused purple. "You cannot be serious. Your weapons are chemical explosives and metal projectiles. We have plasma cannons and quantum disruptors." "Admiral," Chen said with the cold smile of someone who had just revealed a winning hand, "you're about to learn the difference between civilization and warfare. Your species developed weapons to establish dominance. We developed weapons to survive extinction." The transmission ended abruptly as Chen cut the connection. Around her, the bridge crew maintained their focus on their stations, but she could see the grim determination in their eyes. They knew the odds, but they also knew their history. Humanity had faced impossible odds before and survived through ingenuity, adaptation, and an almost pathological refusal to give up. "All stations report ready, Captain," Kumar announced. Chen looked at the tactical display one more time. In a few hours, the largest fleet battle in human history would begin. They were outnumbered nearly 5-1 by technologically superior opponents. By any rational calculation, they should lose decisively. But rational calculations had never fully accounted for human nature. The first phase of the battle began exactly as Admiral Zephyros had predicted. His massive dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their energy shields shimmering like soap bubbles around hulls that dwarfed the largest human vessels. The alien fleet spread across space in an impressive display of coordinated power, each ship taking its designated position in what had been proven effective against dozens of other species. "Target the largest human vessels first," Zephyros ordered from his command throne. We'll eliminate their command structure and force a quick surrender." The Valterian plasma cannons fired in unison, sending brilliant streams of superheated energy across the void toward the human fleet. The aliens expected to see ships vaporized instantly, reduced to expanding clouds of debris by weapons that could crack planetoids. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships simply weren't there anymore. "Report," Zephyros demanded, his hide shifting to confused orange as his weapons fired harmlessly into empty space. "Sir, they're using some kind of rapid maneuvering system," his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. "Our targeting computers can't maintain locks. They're moving in patterns that don't match any known propulsion technology." What the aliens were witnessing was the result of decades of human innovation driven by necessity. Unable to match alien shield technology, human engineers had instead focused on mobility. Their ships used a combination of chemical thrusters, ion drives, and experimental gravity manipulation to perform maneuvers that would have been impossible for the larger, more rigid alien vessels. Captain Chen watched from the Defiance bridge as her ship spun through a series of impossible turns. G-forces that would have crushed any unprotected human absorbed by inertial dampeners, powered by the same fusion reactors that drove their engines. "Pattern Delta 7, she commanded. "All ships execute swarm protocol." The human fleet scattered like a school of fish avoiding a predator, but their movements weren't random. Each ship followed pre-programmed patterns designed to confuse targeting systems while maintaining optimal firing positions. It was a strategy adapted from studying Earth's own predator-prey relationships, specifically the way small, fast hunters could overwhelm larger opponents through coordinated attacks. Admiral Zephyros watched in growing alarm as his massive dreadnoughts tried to track targets that seemed to teleport around the battlefield. His ships were designed for the stately, formal combat that had dominated galactic warfare for millennia. Opposing fleets would line up at maximum range and pound each other with energy weapons until one side's shields failed. The humans weren't following the rules. "They're using kinetic weapons," reported his weapons officer, voice filled with disbelief. "Solid projectiles fired at relativistic speeds. Our shields aren't designed for that type of impact." This was partially true. While alien energy shields were highly effective against plasma and laser weapons, they were less efficient against physical projectiles, especially ones moving at significant fractions of light speed. Human railguns and magnetic accelerators were crude by galactic standards, but they delivered massive kinetic energy in concentrated bursts. The first alien vessel to fall was a Nexus Confederation destroyer. A human frigate, no larger than the alien ship's shuttle bay, had somehow maneuvered within minimum engagement range and fired a spread of tungsten rods directly into the destroyer's engineering section. The projectiles punched through shields and armor like bullets through paper, causing catastrophic decompression that split the vessel in half. "How is this possible?" demanded Commander Hiss of the Serpentine Dominion, as his own ship shuddered under impacts from human weapons. "Their technology is centuries behind ours." The answer lay in fundamental differences in military philosophy. Galactic civilizations had developed weapons to establish dominance and maintain order. Their conflicts were typically brief affairs decided by superior technology and overwhelming force. They had rules, conventions, and established ways of conducting warfare that minimized casualties and prevented total destruction. Humans had no such luxury in their development. Every war in human history had been a struggle for survival, where defeat meant extinction. They had been forced to innovate constantly, to find new ways to kill more efficiently, and to never accept that any weapon or tactic was too crude or underhanded if it meant victory. Dr. Wright's modifications were now coming online across the human fleet. Ships that had appeared to be fleeing suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Seemingly defenseless transports deployed missile pods that had been concealed in their cargo bays. Mining vessels released clouds of smart munitions that had been disguised as asteroid processing equipment. "Captain," Lieutenant Kumar reported from his sensor station, "the aliens are regrouping. Looks like they're trying to form a defensive sphere." Chen smiled grimly. "They're learning. Unfortunately for them, we expected that. Initiate Phase 2. What the aliens didn't know was that the human fleet included dozens of ships that weren't warships at all. They were mining vessels, construction ships, and exploration craft that had been hastily retrofitted with weapons. but their original functions made them uniquely dangerous in ways the aliens couldn't anticipate. The mining ship UES Prospector suddenly accelerated toward the alien formation at maximum burn. Admiral Zephyros's tactical computers identified it as a fleeing cargo vessel and ignored it as a threat. The ship was too small to cause significant damage, and its trajectory would take it clear of the main battle. That was exactly what Captain Rodriguez had been counting on. The Prospector was carrying its normal cargo, 15,000 tons of refined uranium and plutonium intended for reactor fuel. At the last possible moment, Rodriguez activated the ship's emergency beacon and ejected in an escape pod as his vessel impacted the alien flagship at 20% of light speed. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Admiral Zephyros found himself picking himself up from the deck of his command center, his primary ears ringing from the massive detonation that had vaporized his flagship's sister ship. Around him, his officers were struggling to understand what had just happened. "Sir, they used their own vessel as a weapon," his tactical officer reported, voice filled with horror. "They deliberately crashed a ship carrying nuclear materials into the Indomitable." Zephyros stared at the expanding debris field, where one of his most powerful dreadnoughts had been moments before. The concept of deliberately sacrificing your own vessel and crew was so alien to galactic military doctrine that his computers hadn't even flagged it as a possibility. "Casualties?" he managed to ask. "The Indomitable is gone with all hands. The explosion damaged 6 other vessels, and Admiral Crix's command ship has lost main power." For the first time since the battle began, Zephyros felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare: fear. These humans weren't just fighting them. They were fighting in ways that violated every established rule of civilized combat. They were using tactics that required a complete disregard for their own safety and a willingness to sacrifice anything for victory, and he watched more human ships execute seemingly suicidal attacks that somehow resulted in disproportionate damage to his fleet. Admiral Zephyros began to understand that he wasn't fighting a primitive species. He was fighting something far more dangerous, a species that had learned to treat warfare as evolution by other means. Admiral Zephyros's tactical display resembled a nightmare more than a battle report. In the span of 2 hours, his seemingly invincible fleet had lost 18 vessels to an enemy that should have been swept aside like cosmic dust. The humans weren't just fighting unconventionally. They were rewriting the fundamental rules of space combat with every engagement. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the human vessels," reported his sensor operator, her crystalline appendages flickering with nervous light. "Their power output is increasing exponentially." What the aliens were witnessing was the activation of Dr. Wright's most ambitious project, the Adaptive Combat Intelligence Network. Every human ship was linked through quantum communication arrays, sharing targeting data, tactical analysis, and damage assessments in real time. The fleet wasn't fighting as individual vessels. It was operating as a single, distributed organism. Captain Chen felt the change as her ship's AI merged with the network. Suddenly, she could perceive the battle from 43 different perspectives simultaneously, process targeting solutions that accounted for variables across the entire engagement zone, and coordinate attacks with precision that would have been impossible for any single commander. "All vessels. This is Defiant Actual," she announced across the fleet network. "Initiate Apex Protocol." The Apex Protocol was humanity's ultimate expression of coordinated warfare. Every ship in the fleet began moving in perfect synchronization, their individual strengths combining into something greater than the sum of their parts. Fast attack craft screened for heavy cruisers. Electronic warfare vessels jammed alien communications while projecting false targets, and support ships provided covering fire from angles the aliens couldn't predict. Admiral Zephyros watched in growing horror as his fleet's formation began to collapse. The humans were somehow anticipating every tactical decision before he made it, countering strategies that had been successful for thousands of years. His weapons couldn't maintain target locks, his communications were being jammed, and his ships were being picked apart by an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "How are they doing this?" he demanded, his hide cycling through colors of confusion and fear. His science officer, a methane-breathing ethereal, whose species had mastered quantum mechanics when most of the galaxy was still crawling out of primordial oceans, provided an answer that chilled everyone on the bridge. They've networked their entire fleet into a single tactical computer. Each ship is both independent and part of a collective intelligence. It's similar to the hive mind species, but voluntary and temporary. The implications were staggering. Most galactic species that developed hive mind capabilities lost their individuality in the process, becoming efficient but predictable. The humans had somehow achieved the benefits of collective intelligence while maintaining the unpredictability that came from individual creativity. But the real terror was still to come. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're requesting parley." Zephyros almost laughed. "A parley? In the middle of a battle where they were somehow winning against impossible odds? Put it through." The face that appeared on his main screen wasn't Captain Chen. Instead, it was an older human male with graying hair and eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. This was Admiral Harrison, the commander of humanity's entire space fleet. "Admiral Zephyros," Harrison began, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone completely in control of the situation. "I believe it's time we discuss terms." "Terms?" Zephyros sputtered, his hide shifting to outraged red. "You're outnumbered 4-1. Your entire species has fewer ships than my personal battle group." Harrison's expression didn't change. "Admiral, you've lost 18 vessels in 2 hours to what you consider a primitive species. At our current rate of engagement, your fleet will cease to exist as an effective fighting force in approximately 6 hours. I'm offering you the opportunity to withdraw with the majority of your forces intact." The alien admiral's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Withdraw? You think this minor tactical success gives you the right to negotiate from a position of strength?" "Admiral," Harrison said quietly, "what you've seen so far is us being polite." Before Zephyros could respond, his sensor operator's voice cut across the bridge with barely controlled panic. "Sir, we have multiple hyperspace signatures emerging from the outer system. Unknown vessels, human configuration, much larger than anything we've detected before." The tactical display updated to show new contacts. 5 massive human vessels that dwarfed anything in the current engagement. These weren't hastily converted civilian ships or retrofitted mining vessels. These were purpose-built warships bristling with weapon systems that registered as completely unknown to galactic databases. "Allow me to introduce the UES Nemesis. Retribution, vengeance, fury, and wrath," Harrison continued conversationally. "Our newest class of dreadnoughts. You see, Admiral, while you were assembling this impressive fleet to intimidate us, we were building ships specifically designed to fight it. The human dreadnoughts moved with the same impossible agility as their smaller cousins, but they carried weapons that made the alien superiority in firepower suddenly questionable. Massive railguns that could accelerate projectiles to 30% of light speed, missile systems that deployed thousands of self-guided warheads, energy weapons that didn't match galactic technology but were devastatingly effective nonetheless. "This is impossible," Zephyros whispered. "Your industrial capacity can't support vessels of this magnitude." Your intelligence report showed what we wanted them to show," Harrison interrupted. "Did you really think a species that had been preparing for interstellar warfare would reveal their true capabilities to potential enemies?" The truth was even more unsettling than the Admiral realized. Humanity's rapid expansion hadn't been driven by exploration or colonization needs. It had been a carefully orchestrated plan to establish industrial bases, mining operations, and shipyards throughout their region of space. Every colony that the aliens had, dismissed as a simple agricultural settlement, had actually been a fortified position with hidden manufacturing capabilities. Dr. Wright's voice joined the transmission from her position aboard the UES Nemesis. "Admiral, our species has been at war with itself for most of our recorded history. We've had over 10,000 years to perfect the art of killing efficiently. What you're experiencing now is the result of applying that knowledge to interstellar combat." She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display updated to show energy readings from the human fleet that made several alien officers step back in alarm. "Each of our vessels carries enough firepower to sterilize a planet. We've designed them not to conquer territory, but to ensure that any species that threatens our survival simply ceases to exist." Admiral Zephyros felt something crack inside his chest. The confident certainty that had carried him through decades of warfare was crumbling as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. These weren't primitive upstarts to be disciplined. They were apex predators who had been allowing their prey to think they were safe. "What are your terms?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own fleet's distress calls. Admiral Harrison's expression softened slightly, showing what might have been sympathy. "Immediate withdrawal of all hostile forces from human space, recognition of our territorial claims, establishment of formal diplomatic relations with appropriate mutual defense treaties. And if we refuse?" Harrison's eyes hardened to something that reminded Zephyros uncomfortably of a predator selecting its next meal. "Then we demonstrate why evolution doesn't produce apex predators by teaching them to show mercy to threats." Around him, Zephyros could hear his officers whispering in their native languages, but he didn't need translation to understand their meaning. They had come expecting to discipline unruly children, and instead found themselves facing something that their worst nightmares hadn't prepared them for. A species that had turned warfare into an evolutionary advantage. Stretched across space like a taut wire ready to snap, Admiral Zephyros stared at his tactical display, watching his once mighty fleet limping through space while human vessels moved around them like sharks circling wounded prey. The mathematics of the situation were undeniable. He was facing complete annihilation unless he accepted terms that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from the other fleet commanders. They're requesting orders." Zephyros could imagine the panic spreading through his allied fleet. Species that had never faced serious military opposition were watching their most advanced vessels being systematically dismantled by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The psychological impact was perhaps more devastating than the physical damage. "Admiral," came the strained voice of Commander Hiss over the fleet communication network, "my ship has lost primary weapons and maneuvering. The humans have somehow disabled our quantum disruptors without breaching our hull. How is that possible?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Valara's medical frigate had remained at the edge of the battle zone, and her calm voice cut through the chaos with scientific precision. "They're using electromagnetic pulse weapons specifically designed to interact with our technology. Their understanding of our systems is far more comprehensive than we realized." Admiral Harrison's image remained on Zephyros's main screen, patiently waiting for a response while his fleet continued its methodical destruction of alien resistance. But there was something in the human commander's eyes that suggested this wasn't entirely the outcome he had hoped for. "Admiral," Harrison said quietly, "I want you to understand something. We didn't want this fight. Humanity has always preferred cooperation to conflict when possible. But we learned long ago that survival sometimes requires making yourself too dangerous to attack casually." Zephyros's scientific training warred with his military pride. The evidence was overwhelming. Humanity possessed capabilities that exceeded galactic norms in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Their industrial capacity was far greater than intelligence estimates. Their technological development had followed completely different paths that produced solutions no one had anticipated. Most importantly, their approach to warfare incorporated concepts that most civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. "You're asking me to surrender the combined fleet of 47 civilizations to a species that made first contact 50 years ago," Zephyros said, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. "I'm asking you to recognize reality," Harrison replied. "Your fleet was assembled to intimidate us into compliance. Instead, you've demonstrated that we represent a greater threat to galactic stability than anyone realized. Every minute this battle continues, more of your people die unnecessarily." The brutal truth of Harrison's words was underscored by another explosion, as a crystalline collective battleship simply came apart under sustained human fire. The beautiful living crystal that formed the ship's hull shattered into billions of fragments, each one representing centuries of careful growth and cultivation. Resonance of Truth's harmonic death song echoed across all frequencies as his consciousness fragmented with his ship. "Enough!" Dr. Valara's voice cut across the fleet communications with an authority that surprised everyone. "This slaughter serves no purpose. Admiral Zephyros, accept their terms before we lose more lives to pride." But even as the words were spoken, sensors detected new hyperspace signatures throughout the system. More human vessels were arriving, but these weren't warships. They were hospital ships, rescue vessels, and support craft moving to assist damaged alien vessels. Captain Chen's voice joined the transmission from her position, coordinating the rescue operations. Admiral Zephyros, we're detecting life signs aboard several of your damaged vessels. Our medical teams are standing by to assist with evacuations if you'll accept our help. The gesture was so unexpected that several alien officers stepped back in confusion. In galactic warfare, medical assistance was typically provided only after formal surrender. The idea of offering aid during active combat violated numerous tactical doctrines. Why? Zephyros asked, genuinely puzzled. Dr. Wright answered from her position aboard the Nemesis. Because we remember what it's like to be on the losing side of a war. Our species has faced extinction multiple times. We know the difference between necessary force and pointless cruelty. The human medical ships moved through the battle zone with complete disregard for their own safety, pulling survivors from damaged alien vessels while human warships provided protective screens. It was a display of tactical confidence so overwhelming that it constituted psychological warfare of the highest order. Admiral Zephyros watched a human medical team risk their lives to extract survivors from a Valtarian cruiser that was threatening to explode at any moment. The rescued aliens were immediately transported to human hospital ships where they received the same quality of care as human casualties. Sir, his tactical officer reported quietly, fleet casualties are approaching 30%. If this continues, we'll lose the ability to conduct organized withdrawal. Zephyros closed his primary eyes and made the calculation that military commanders throughout history had been forced to make. When does tactical withdrawal become strategic necessity? Admiral Harrison, he said formally, his voice carrying across both fleets. The Valtarian Empire accepts your terms. We will withdraw our forces from human space and establish formal diplomatic relations. The response from the Allied fleet was immediate and chaotic. Some commanders expressed relief, others outrage, but the humans had already begun powering down their weapon systems in a gesture of good faith that demonstrated their control over the situation. Admiral Zephyros, Harrison replied with what might have been respect. Your decision will save thousands of lives on both sides. We look forward to a more productive relationship in the future. As the human fleet began coordinating the massive rescue operation for damaged alien vessels, Admiral Zephyros realized that humanity had just demonstrated something far more terrifying than superior firepower. They had shown the galaxy a species that could wage total war and then immediately shift to humanitarian operations without missing a beat. Dr. Valara's medical frigate approached the human fleet, requesting permission to coordinate rescue efforts. As she worked alongside human medical teams, she began to understand the true scope of what had just occurred. The humans hadn't just won a military victory. They had fundamentally altered the galactic understanding of what it meant to be an apex predator. Dr. Wright, she transmitted privately to the human scientist. May I ask you something? Of course, Doctor. How long have you been preparing for this exact scenario? There was a pause before Wright responded. Doctor, we've been preparing for this scenario since the first human looked at the stars and wondered if something was looking back. When you're the only known intelligent species on your planet, you have to assume that anything you might meet out here could be hostile. The implications sent chills through Dr. Valara's entire body. Humanity hadn't stumbled into interstellar warfare. They had been preparing for it for millennia. Every aspect of their technology, their social structure, their expansion strategy had been designed with the assumption that they would eventually face existential threats among the stars. As the combined fleets began the complex process of disengagement, Admiral Zephyros found himself studying the human vessels with new eyes. What he had initially dismissed as crude construction now revealed itself as brilliant engineering optimized for a completely different set of priorities. Where galactic ships emphasized elegance and energy efficiency, human vessels prioritized modularity, repairability, and tactical flexibility. Sir, his science officer reported, I'm detecting some unusual readings from the human ships. It appears their hulls are designed to be rapidly reconfigured for different mission profiles. That explained how civilian vessels had been converted to combat roles so quickly. The humans had built their entire space infrastructure with the assumption that any ship might need to become a warship at a moment's notice. Admiral Harrison's final transmission to the alien fleet carried an undertone that would be discussed in galactic military academies for centuries to come. Admiral Zephyros, I want you to understand that what you witnessed today represents humanity operating under strict rules of engagement, designed to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure. We sincerely hope that future interactions will make such demonstrations unnecessary. The unspoken implication was clear. This had been humanity showing restraint as the alien fleet began its withdrawal from human space, carrying with them the knowledge that the galaxy's newest members were also potentially its most dangerous. Dr. Valara made a decision that would shape interstellar relations for generations. She requested permission to remain behind and establish the first joint human-alien medical research facility. Why? Captain Chen asked during the permission briefing. Dr. Valara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors that conveyed deep respect mixed with healthy fear. Because I want to learn from a species that has turned survival into an art form. And because someone 6 months after what galactic historians would later call the Awakening War, the ripple effects of humanity's military demonstration continued to reshape interstellar politics. The Galactic Council chambers, once filled with confident representatives secure in their technological superiority, now buzzed with nervous energy and hushed conversations about the human question. Chancellor Crix, her insectoid frame more subdued than before, called the emergency session to order. We are here to address the fundamental changes in galactic power dynamics following recent events in human space. The assembled representatives bore little resemblance to the confident leaders who had voted for military action against humanity. Many species had begun rapid military modernization programs, while others had initiated diplomatic overtures toward Earth. The comfortable assumptions about galactic hierarchy had been shattered in a matter of hours. Ambassador Thorne of the Nexus Confederation, his gray skin still bearing the marks of stress from his species' military losses, spoke first. The humans have established military superiority in their sector and are expanding their influence at an unprecedented rate. 3 species have already signed mutual defense pacts with them. The reality was even more concerning than Thorne's brief summary suggested. The Healers Guild had been the first to formally ally with humanity, drawn by their advanced medical technologies and ethical approach to warfare. The Peaceful Gardener Collective had followed, seeking human protection for their agricultural worlds. Most surprisingly, the notoriously independent Void Wanderers had requested human escort for their deep space exploration vessels. Dr. Valara, now serving as the official liaison between the Healers Guild and humanity, stood to address the council. Her bioluminescent patterns glowed with calm authority as she prepared to deliver news that would disturb many of her colleagues. Honored representatives, I have spent the past 6 months working directly with human scientists and military personnel. I believe it is crucial that you understand the true scope of what we encountered. She activated a holographic display showing detailed analyses of human technology, social structure, and military capabilities. The data painted a picture that was far more complex and concerning than anyone had anticipated. First, their technological development follows patterns completely unlike any known galactic species. Where we developed efficient energy weapons, they perfected kinetic systems that our defenses couldn't handle. Where we prioritized individual ship capabilities, they created networked fleets that function as collective intelligences. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The implications of facing an enemy that thought in fundamentally different ways were staggering. Second, Dr. Valara continued, their social structure is uniquely adapted for sustained conflict. They maintain multiple redundant command systems, distributed manufacturing capabilities, and population centers designed to continue functioning even under extreme stress. Admiral Zephyros, his once proud bearing now marked by hard-won humility, stood to add his own observations. The most disturbing aspect of human military doctrine is their approach to escalation. They don't gradually increase force levels. They assess the maximum force that might be required and deploy it immediately. This was a crucial point that most galactic strategists had missed. Human military philosophy emphasized overwhelming response to any existential threat. They had learned from their own history that allowing enemies to adapt or regroup often led to prolonged conflicts with higher casualties. How many ships do they actually possess? Asked Commander Hiss, his serpentine form coiled in defensive postures. The answer came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Chen, humanity's first official representative to the Galactic Council, had been quietly observing the proceedings from the diplomatic gallery. Now she stood, her presence commanding attention from beings who had learned to respect human capabilities. "Commander, that's an excellent question with a complex answer. Our official fleet consists of approximately 200 vessels of various classifications. However, our entire civilian infrastructure is designed for rapid military conversion when necessary." She paused to let the implications sink in. Every mining ship, transport vessel, and exploration craft in human space can be retrofitted for combat operations within 72 hours. Our total potential fleet strength is classified, but I can assure you it exceeds what any single galactic power could deploy. The chamber fell silent as representatives calculated the implications. Humanity's expansion had established industrial bases throughout their territory, each one capable of producing military vessels on short notice. Their civilian population had been trained in defensive operations from childhood. Most terrifyingly, their entire society seemed designed around the assumption that they would eventually face existential threats. Chancellor Crix's mandibles clicked nervously as she addressed the human ambassador. "Ambassador Chen, the Council is concerned about the stability implications of your species' military capabilities. How do we establish mutual trust when you represent such overwhelming force?" Chen's response was measured but carried undertones that reminded everyone present of the demonstration 6 months earlier. "Chancellor, humanity has always believed that peace is best maintained through strength, coupled with restraint. We have no interest in conquering or dominating other species. We simply insist on the right to exist and expand without interference." Dr. Valara added her own perspective. "If I may, I believe the real issue is that humanity represents something the galaxy has never encountered. A species that achieved technological advancement through constant conflict rather than peaceful development. This was the heart of the matter. Most galactic civilizations had achieved spaceflight through cooperative scientific advancement and had developed military capabilities as afterthoughts. Humanity had reached the stars while simultaneously perfecting increasingly sophisticated ways to wage war against their own species. "What are your intentions regarding galactic politics?" asked Resonance of Truth's replacement, a young crystalline being whose harmonics conveyed deep concern. Ambassador Chen smiled, and somehow that expression was more unsettling than any threat could have been. "We intend to be good neighbors. We want to trade, share knowledge, and cooperate on projects of mutual benefit. But we also want to make it clear that we will not tolerate aggression against human territory or citizens." She gestured to the holographic display, which updated to show human expansion patterns over the past 6 months. "We've established colonies in 8 new systems, signed defense pacts with 5 species, and begun joint research projects with 12 others. Our goal is integration, not domination." The expansion was staggering in its scope and speed. Humanity was leveraging their military demonstration into diplomatic influence throughout their region of space. Species that had once dismissed them as primitives were now competing for human attention and protection. Admiral Zephyros stood slowly, his scarred hide bearing witness to the price of underestimating humanity. "The real question facing this council is whether we adapt to the new reality or continue operating under assumptions that have proven dangerous." He looked around the chamber at representatives who had learned to fear a species they had once planned to discipline. "Humanity has demonstrated that they are not simply another galactic power. They are something new, something that follows different rules. We can either learn to work with them or risk discovering what happens when they decide we represent a threat to their survival." The implications hung in the air like a sword over the assembled leaders. The galaxy had awakened something it didn't understand, and now everyone had to learn to live with the consequences of that awakening. 2 years after the Awakening War, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. The human embassy on Galactic Central Station represented more than diplomatic relations. It stood as a monument to how quickly the balance of power could shift when assumptions proved wrong. Dr. Valara walked through the embassy's medical research wing, marveling at the cooperation that had emerged from what began as conflict. Human and alien scientists worked side by side, developing treatments that combined the best of both technological approaches. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's demonstration of their capacity for destruction had led to unprecedented collaboration. "Dr. Valara," called Dr. Wright from across the laboratory, The quantum healing matrix is ready for the next phase of testing. The project represented everything that had changed about galactic relations. Human engineering precision combined with alien theoretical knowledge to create medical technologies that neither species could have developed alone. But more importantly, it represented trust between former enemies. Ambassador Chen found herself in the strange position of being the galaxy's most feared and respected diplomat. Her office overlooked the station's main docking bay, where human and alien vessels shared space in carefully negotiated harmony. The sight never failed to remind her of how far they had come. Her daily briefings painted a picture of a galaxy in transition. 7 more species had signed formal treaties with humanity. The human fleet had grown to over 500 vessels, but most were now dedicated to exploration and scientific research rather than military operations. Trade between human and alien worlds had exceeded all projections. Yet beneath the surface cooperation, everyone understood the fundamental truth that governed all interactions. Humanity had proven themselves capable of systematic violence on a scale that most galactic civilizations couldn't match. Admiral Harrison, now commanding Earth's expanded fleet from the massive space station Prometheus, reviewed reports that would have seemed like science fiction just a few years earlier. Human colonies were thriving throughout their territory. Joint human-alien research stations had made breakthrough discoveries in physics, medicine, and engineering. The species that had once threatened to destroy humanity were now some of their most valuable partners. But the Admiral never forgot the lesson that had made this cooperation possible. Peace through strength wasn't just a motto. It was a survival strategy that had allowed humanity to carve out their place among the stars. "Sir," his aide reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. The Devourer swarm has been detected in the Andromeda approach vector." Harrison's expression hardened. The Devourer swarm represented the galaxy's oldest nightmare, a species of mechanical predators that consumed entire star systems for raw materials. They appeared every few millennia, destroyed whatever they encountered, then vanished back into deep space. No galactic power had ever successfully resisted them. Alert status? The Galactic Council is calling for an emergency session. They're requesting human participation in the defense planning. Harrison smiled grimly. 18 months ago, the galaxy had tried to destroy humanity for being too aggressive. Now they were asking for help against an enemy that made human military capabilities seem restrained by comparison. The emergency council session convened within hours, with representatives arriving from across known space. The mood was starkly different from the confident gathering that had once voted to discipline humanity. These leaders understood they were facing potential extinction. Chancellor Crix, her authority diminished but her desperation evident, addressed the assembly. "The Devourer swarm's scout elements have been detected at the galactic rim. Based on historical patterns, we have approximately 6 months before the main force arrives." Admiral Zephyros, now serving as military coordinator for the galactic defense effort, provided the strategic assessment. Previous encounters with the swarm resulted in the loss of entire sectors. Their technology adapts to our weapons faster than we can develop countermeasures. Traditional galactic military doctrine has proven ineffective against them. The unspoken question hung in the air. Would humanity's unconventional approach to warfare prove more successful? Ambassador Chen stood to address the assembly, her presence commanding the same respect that had once been reserved for species with millennia of galactic history. "The United Earth government has reviewed the available data on the Devourer swarm. We're prepared to contribute to the galactic defense effort." The relief in the chamber was palpable, but Chen wasn't finished. However, effective defense against this threat will require unprecedented cooperation and coordination. We'll need access to all galactic military assets, complete sharing of technological resources, and unified command authority. The terms were essentially asking the galaxy to place itself under human leadership for the duration of the crisis. 6 months earlier, such a suggestion would have been laughable. Now it seemed like the only rational response to an existential threat. Dr. Valara spoke for the Healers Guild. "The Guild supports full cooperation with human defense plans. We've seen their approach to impossible challenges." One by one, the representatives voiced their agreement. Species that had once considered humanity primitive upstarts were now placing their survival in human hands. Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the main screen, transmitted from his command center on Prometheus. Honored representatives, humanity accepts the responsibility you're placing on us. We'll coordinate the galactic defense effort with one crucial understanding. We fight this war using human military doctrine. The implications were clear. There would be no gradual escalation, no attempts to minimize casualties, no adherence to traditional rules of engagement. Humanity would treat the Devourer swarm as they treated all existential threats, with overwhelming force applied without hesitation or mercy. "What do you need from us?" Admiral Zephyros asked. Harrison's response transformed the chamber's atmosphere from desperate hope to grim determination. "We need every ship you can spare, every weapon you can build, and every resource you can provide. But most importantly, we need you to understand that defeating the Devourer swarm will require tactics that make our previous demonstration look restrained." Dr. Wright joined the transmission from her position aboard the research vessel Einstein. "We've been analyzing historical data on the swarm. Their advantage comes from technological adaptation and overwhelming numbers. Our response will focus on unpredictability and escalation beyond their ability to counter." Ambassador Chen provided the final piece of the puzzle. The Devourer swarm operates under the assumption that galactic civilizations will fight predictably, following established patterns of warfare. They've never encountered a species that approaches conflict the way humanity does. As the council session concluded and representatives began coordinating, the largest military mobilization in galactic history, the truth was becoming clear. The galaxy had awakened humanity's predatory instincts to deal with their own conflicts, never realizing they might face something even more dangerous. Now, as ancient mechanical predators approached from the void between galaxies, the species that had once feared humanity's capacity for violence were about to discover that there were far worse things in the universe than an awakened apex predator. There were things that even apex predators considered threats worth eliminating completely. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between humanity showing restraint and humanity preparing for extinction-level warfare. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, the Devourer swarm was approaching a galaxy that had unknowingly armed itself with the most dangerous weapon evolution had ever produced. A species that had turned survival into an art form and warfare into a science.